They promised an economic miracle. They built dams, they built railways, and they built a narrative that Ethiopia was the China of Africa. But today, the bill has come due, and the African giant has fallen to its knees. Breaking reports confirm that Ethiopia is entering the final, brutal phase of its debt restructuring saga. After officially defaulting on its $1 billion Eurobond in December 2023, the government in Addis Ababa is now sitting across the table from international bondholders, begging for a lifeline. The timeline is critical. February 2026 marks the moment where the haircut, the amount of money investors will lose, is finally decided. But while the bankers in London and New York are arguing over percentage points, the people of Ethiopia are paying the real price. The mainstream media calls this a necessary correction. The Observer calls it an economic capitulation. To understand the gravity of this moment, you have to look past the spreadsheets and look at the streets. This isn't just a story about debt. It is a story about the cost of war and the failure of the global financial architecture. Ethiopia was the fastest growing economy on the continent for a decade. Then came the Tigray War in 2020. The conflict didn't just kill hundreds of thousands. It burned through the country's cash reserves and scared away the foreign investment that was fueling the boom. When the dust settled, the government was broke. They turned to the G20's Common Framework, a bureaucratic nightmare designed to help poor countries fix their debts. Instead, it trapped Ethiopia in a 2-year limbo of uncertainty, freezing them out of global markets while interest payments continued to pile up. The framework failed. It was too slow, too politicized, and too weak to bring China and Western lenders to the same table quickly enough. Let's look at the deep dive data. The turning point was July 2024. Desperate for cash, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed signed a $3.4 billion deal with the IMF. But the IMF never gives money for free. They demanded a market correction. In plain English, they forced Ethiopia to float its currency, the Birr. The result was catastrophic for the average citizen. The Birr lost more than 50% of its value almost overnight. Savings were wiped out. Import costs skyrocketed. The price of fuel, medicine, and food surged. The reform that pleased the economists in Washington devastated the middle class in Addis. This is the hidden tax of sovereign debt. When a country defaults, the citizens pay for it with their purchasing power. Now, in 2026, the focus is on the private bondholders. These are the hedge funds and asset managers who bought Ethiopia's debt back when times were good. They are currently negotiating a restructuring deal that could see them take an 18% loss, or more. But they're playing hardball. They know that until Ethiopia signs this deal, the country is officially a financial pariah, unable to borrow a single cent to finish its massive infrastructure projects. The risks here are massive. If the talks collapse, Ethiopia remains in default, and the hard currency crunch gets worse. Factories are already closing because they can't get the dollars to import raw materials. But if the government concedes too much to the bondholders, they mortgage the country's future revenue for decades. It is a lose-lose scenario. There is also a geopolitical angle. Ethiopia is a BRICS member. The fact that a key BRICS nation is being forced to swallow bitter IMF pills shows the limits of that alliance. China, Ethiopia's largest bilateral creditor, has been unusually quiet, allowing the Western institutions to dictate the terms of the restructuring. This silence speaks volumes about Beijing's own hesitation to bail out its Belt and Road partners. So, what happens in the next 30 days? Watch the bondholder committee announcements. If a deal is struck, the government will declare victory and say, "We are back in business." But watch the inflation rate. A deal on paper doesn't put food on the table. The restructuring might save the government's balance sheet, but it has already broken the household budget. The verdict is grim. Ethiopia wanted to be an Asian tiger. Instead, it has become a case study in the debt trap. They borrowed to build a future, but they are now selling that future to pay for the past. The sovereignty of the nation is now held by a committee of creditors. You've seen the official narrative. Now you have the facts. Confirm your clearance by hitting that subscribe button.